Ancient Rome was one of the most fascinating and influential civilizations in human history. At its peak, it stretched across much of the Mediterranean world, encompassing territories in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. It was a society that was renowned for its military might, its achievements in architecture and engineering, and its lasting cultural contributions to the Western world. One of the most interesting aspects of ancient Rome was daily life. How did the average Roman live? What did they eat, wear, and do for entertainment? In this essay, we will explore the daily life of ancient Romans and gain insight into this remarkable civilization. Housing and accommodations. Ancient Rome was a city of contrasts when it came to housing. The wealthiest citizens lived in opulent villas, complete with gardens, courtyards, and ornate decorations. These homes were often built around a central atrium, which served as a gathering place for family and guests. They were equipped with running water, heated floors, and even private baths. However, the majority of the population lived in much simpler accommodations. Most people lived in apartment buildings, known as insulae. These were often cramped, dark, and poorly ventilated. They were also a fire hazard, as many were made of wood and packed tightly together. As a result, there were strict building codes in place to prevent fires from spreading. For the poorest Romans, housing was even more basic. They might live in hovels made of mud and straw, or in tents set up in the city's outskirts. These dwellings were prone to flooding, disease, and theft. Food and drink. Food and drink were an important part of daily life in ancient Rome. The Romans were known for their hearty appetites and their love of rich, flavorful dishes. They enjoyed a wide variety of foods, including meat, fish, vegetables, and fruits. One of the most important staples of the Roman diet was bread. Bread was consumed in vast quantities by people of all social classes. It was made from wheat or barley flour and was often mixed with other ingredients like honey, olives, or cheese. Meat was another important part of the Roman diet, but it was primarily consumed by the wealthy. The poor might have access to pork or poultry on occasion, but beef was rare and expensive. Fish was more commonly consumed, especially in coastal regions. Wine was the drink of choice for most Romans. Wine was produced throughout the Roman Empire, and it was consumed in large quantities at meals and social gatherings. Beer and other alcoholic beverages were also available, but they were not as popular as wine. Clothing and fashion. Clothing was an important way for Romans to express their social status and identity. The wealthiest citizens wore expensive fabrics like silk and linen, while the poor had to make do with cheaper materials like wool and leather. The toga was the most iconic garment of ancient Rome. It was a long, draped garment that was worn by male citizens for formal occasions. Women wore a similar garment called a stola, which was often decorated with embroidery or other embellishments. Everyday clothing was more practical and varied depending on the individual's occupation and social status. Men typically wore tunics and trousers, while women wore dresses that covered their bodies from neck to ankle. Entertainment and leisure. The Romans were a people who enjoyed leisure time and entertainment. They had a wide variety of pastimes and activities to choose from, ranging from chariot races to gladiatorial combat to theater performances. Theater was a popular form of entertainment in ancient Rome. The city had several large theaters, including the Theater of Pompey and the Theater of Marcellus. These venues hosted plays, musical performances, and other cultural events. The Romans also enjoyed sports and games. Chariot races were one of the most popular events, with teams of horses pulling chariots around a track while drivers maneuvered them through tight turns and dangerous obstacles. The Circus Maximus in Rome was a massive stadium that could hold up to 250,000 spectators, and it was the site of many chariot races. Gladiatorial combat was another popular form of entertainment. Gladiators were trained fighters who battled each other in arenas, often to the death. These spectacles were highly ritualized and often involved elaborate sets and costumes. Board games were also popular, with games like chess, checkers, and backgammon being played by people of all ages and social classes. Dice games were also popular, with players using six-sided dice to determine their moves. Religion and beliefs. Religion was an integral part of daily life in ancient Rome. The Romans were polytheistic, meaning they worshipped many gods and goddesses. These deities were believed to control various aspects of life, such as fertility, war, and agriculture. The most important gods in the Roman pantheon were Jupiter, the king of the gods, and his wife Juno, the goddess of marriage and childbirth. Other important gods included Neptune, the god of the sea, Mars, the god of war, and Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. The Romans also believed in the concept of noumena, which were divine spirits that inhabited natural objects like trees, rivers, and mountains. These spirits were believed to have the power to bless or curse people, and they were often the subject of religious rituals and sacrifices. Education and learning. Education was highly valued in ancient Rome, and it was considered essential for success in both public and private life. Boys of wealthy families were typically educated at home by tutors, while poorer children might attend public schools known as ludi. The curriculum for Roman education was focused on language, literature, and rhetoric. Latin was the primary language taught, and students were expected to master it to a high level of fluency. Greek was also studied, as it was considered a prestigious language and was necessary for those seeking to enter certain professions. In addition to language study, students also learned about history, mathematics, and science. Physical education was also an important part of the curriculum, with sports and outdoor activities being encouraged.